I think that's probably one of the biggest purposes of the Sermon on the Mount. When you read that, you get the idea from Jesus that we need him for various things, and he shows us through those teachings that there are certain things in life that we depend on him so much for. Today is the last message in that series on Sermon on the Mount. Obviously, I didn't cover every topic that's in those 3 chapters. Some of them we may do at another time. But today, the series has been built on kind of one-word things, and today we're going to look at build, because every one of us today we're building life. Now, guys, I don't know how much you think about that or how often you've thought about it in that term or in those terms, but you're building life right now. I'm still building life. Some of our older congregation, some of our folks are older in life, and they're still building life. We never stop. No matter how old we are or what stage in life we're at, we never quit building life. And sometimes we don't realize that when we go through the days or the weeks or the months and the years that we're building on life. And I want you to think about that today, that you are building life right now. Okay? We sort of want to go through all these events in life, don't we? We sort of carve out, or we sort of compartmentalize life sometimes, like, well, I'm through grade school, I'm through high school, I'm through college, I'm getting married, I've raised my kids, I've got a job, I'm pushing for retirement, I'm going on vacation, whatever it is. We have the tendency to compartmentalize our lives. We put them in little compartments or boxes. And we go through this part of life, we look to the next one, and, have you noticed that sometimes when we're in this compartment way back here, we wish we were in the compartment way up there. And it's like, man, don't rush through life so much. But we're building life all the time. Every move that you or I make is a build on life. All of the decisions that you make, the ones you're contemplating right now, some of you are contemplating some decisions in your life right now. You're thinking about a decision that you have to make right now. And it's going to change your life. It's going to change your direction. It's going to decide some things for you when you make that decision, whatever it is. And that decision is going to be part of you building on your life. And everything is like that. The accomplishments build on life. Your GPA right now, guys, is going to affect your life, isn't it? Your GPA. If you have a 2.0 or a 4.2, that's a big difference, isn't it, in some categories, especially in some fields or vocations. And so your accomplishments are going to decide part of how you build on life. Listen, ladies and guys, every date that you go on, you're building on life, okay? You're going to decide this is the first and last date or the first of many, okay? So you're building on life, okay? All this stuff is like that. Every time you eat a meal, believe it or not, I want to look at life this way. Every time you eat a meal, you're building on life. Whether it's at Montgomery Inn or that new Vietnamese restaurant in Findlay Market, Pho Lang Thang, is that it? They've got this Vietnamese restaurant down there now that's real popular. So every time you sit down and eat a meal with somebody, you're building on life. And I really think that's how God wants us to look at our lives. It's not just this thing or these years or these events that we go through, that every day we're building on life. Okay, and I want you to think about it that way if you haven't already. The Sermon on the Mount is not just a bunch of instructions. And guys, I know this too, that we as individuals or different cultures or whatever it is today, there's a wide mix of people that come to M2 service. And we look at things differently. We have different perspectives on things sometimes. And that's just who we are. That's where we come from, what we've been taught or what we've learned. But the Sermon on the Mount, God never wanted us to take the Bible and look at it as a book of instructions alone, okay? It's certainly not, when Jesus preached or taught the Sermon on the Mount, he wasn't just giving us like these suggestions. It's like, I suggest you do life this way, or would you think about that? No, he was giving us some real guidelines. He was saying, this is how you build life. How do I know that? And I'm going to touch on it later, but if you look at the last part of this message, the end of chapter 7, he says to practice these things. Look at it for yourself. He says, practice this. And so he's talking about this is how you live life. I'm not just suggesting it. He's saying this is it. It's a message that's broken into many topics. And I think Jesus is telling us this is how we can best live life. Okay? And that's what we want to share on Sunday mornings in this service, is how you can best live life, how you can, capture this relationship with God and with Jesus Christ the way he meant for it to be, okay? And we get to do that in 59 minutes or so every Sunday morning, and other times during the week too, the church does. But let me ask you a question this morning. Why would God not want you to live a good life? Why would he not want that? Because he does. God wants you and I both to live a good life, all right? Now, the teachings of Jesus never tell us, you read the Bible, you read the New Testament, Jesus is he's never going to teach us how to be rich, how to be successful, how to be popular. You won't find that in his teachings. He does not teach on those things. He doesn't teach us how to be prosperous, although the Bible tells us that we can be prosperous. But what Jesus does tell us is this, guys. He tells us that we can always have a good life. And whether we are facing problems or decisions, whatever it is you're going through in your life right now, maybe it's a physical thing, maybe it's a spiritual thing, maybe it's an educational thing, I don't know what it is, but whatever it is in your life right now that you're facing, in your circle, God is saying that no matter what is happening in your circle right now, you can still have a good life. Okay? Now let's read this, Matthew chapter 7. This is the end of the message, Sermon on the Mount, okay? And it's one message. 3 chapters, that's a long message, isn't it? An hour is a long message. Chapter 7, verse 24 and 25. Therefore, anyone who hears these words of mine, now here it comes, ready? And puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. When I read the scriptures, guys, for me, I think it's always pretty simple. Not easy, but simple. If we hear it, if we put them into practice, then I'm pretty wise, okay? That's the best I can do. Then I can build my life on a solid foundation. That's what he means there, on the rock. Jesus is talking about always building our life, or building life on him, rock, solid, static, okay? And so he says that if we practice these things, that we are like a wise man who built his house on a rock. The rain came, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had a foundation on the rock. Every one of us in here today, me, you, and everybody else, we are going to face storms and streams and rivers and mountains, and things in your life are going to beat up against you if they're not doing it already. And Jesus is saying, if we practice these, if we take the things that God gives us and we listen and we apply them, then we build this foundation that nothing can shake, okay? Now that's the good life. You see, the good life, guys, the Bible's not teaching us how we can prevent or eliminate all these problems of life. In fact, he talks about that is exactly how life is going to be. But Jesus is saying, I can give you something through me that can help you in these moments that you are absolutely going to face. Okay? And so that's why we're talking. That's why we're going to end this series on building life, because I want you to have some things that you can use to build life. That your life can be unshakable. And that doesn't mean that you don't doubt, doesn't mean that you don't fear. It doesn't mean that there may not be moments in your life when it's like, you know what, I just don't know what to do. I don't have enough money. I'm not sure what direction to take. I'm not sure if I can trust this person. It doesn't mean that at all. It just simply means that your life really can be unshakable if we trust God and say, God, what does your word say about how to live this part of my life? And that's what we're looking at. You see, every one of us, guys, there are moments when we feel overwhelmed, overstressed, overworked, over something. And so, there are people right here in this room today that feel one of those things: overstressed, overworked, overdone in some way. And that's what he's talking about here. When this stuff comes on you, that your house, your life is going to stand firm if you build it with the right foundation. So where does that lead us? I think it leads us to the question, what is my foundation? What kind of foundation am I building with my life? And I'm going to answer that question, and you're going to answer that question. And whether we have the answer or not, we're doing that. You're building life right now. You're building foundation. Every one of you are. I am. And so it's like, how will my foundation hold me up? What am I building on? What is it? Well, I love Jesus. I love the way he teaches because he never mixes words. He never does. You notice that? Jesus doesn't play these dumb little word games like we do today. He doesn't do semantics. We tied the message on how important our words are. He's a straight talker. He just throws it out there. Have you noticed that? He throws it out there and says, here it is. Here's the truth, and you can embrace it and believe it. You can do what you want to with it, but here's the truth. And so I love that about all the teachings of the New Testament, the red letter words you might want to call them. And the Sermon on the Mount ends with a challenge to put these things into practice and make them a part of our lifestyle. And so very simply today, guys, that's what we're going to look at in the next few minutes, okay? Putting these things in practice, building my foundation, and having the kind of lifestyle that's good no matter what's coming against me or how life's turning out. Okay, well, we've read Matthew chapter 7, 24 and 25. Now, what was Jesus trying to do here? I think he was trying to show us that how we can make the best investments in our life. And that's based on what we build on. I want you to look at your life this morning, guys. And maybe you've never done this before, but I want you to look at your life like it's a house today or a building of some kind. Because it really is. It's a building. And when I was preparing this message, I was thinking back several years ago when my brother-in-law and I, we built a house in Loveland. Just right over here, over in Loveland, Ohio. It was going to be his dream home, him and my oldest sister. It was going to be their dream home. They were going to raise their kids there. They were going to spend their whole life in this house. And so he asked me, he said, hey, I'd never built a house before. I did some little projects before Birdhouse, But he said, would you help me build a house? And he'd never built a house before. So he got blueprints, and we just started it on this thing, and we had the basement dug out, and then from the basement you put a foundation down, and you have to put up the forms, you have to pour the concrete, you have to let the concrete cure, and then you have to put the floor in the basement before you can do anything else. Now we knew this. We knew that in order to build the proper foundation that was going to hold up the entire house, that the concrete had to be mixed properly, it had to cure properly, and it had to be constructed in a way that it was going to hold up. Okay? And so I learned a lot about building a home when we did that many years ago. And that house is still there, and it's still there, and it's a good house. And so, but I learned so much about how this might apply to our lives today. In building that foundation, it took a long time to put up the forms, took the right mix of concrete, the right mix of materials, and then we had to determine how well this foundation was going to hold up the house. That's what I want you to think about right now. The foundation of your life is going to hold up everything else in your life. What you're building on right now is going to determine how well everything else holds up. And Jesus was saying that if we practice these things and we build our houses, our lives on the rock, then all this stuff can come against us and it'll still stand through anything. You see, guys, this is one place we can never go on the cheap. When you talk about building your life and you talk about the foundation of all that's going to be a part of who you are in the next decades, it's a place in your life that none of us can go on the cheap. meaning that we can't cut corners, we can't take shortcuts. We have to take every step in the process and be very careful as we're building these foundations in our lives. But you know what happens sometimes? And this happens in poor construction. We want to get the job done. And we want to get it done as fast as we can get it done, as cheap as we can get it done, and just make the house look good. But the foundation is something we can't do on the cheap. You see, have you ever noticed this too, that when someone comes over to your house, they never ask you, can I see your foundation? You ever notice that? You ever notice that? Have you ever noticed what we do with foundations of homes? We put shrubs out there, don't we? We cover it up. Okay? We make the house look good. Nobody comes over and says, what kind of foundation do you have? Can we go to your basement? Can I see if it's a poured foundation, a stone foundation, or whatever it is? Nobody says that. But it's the most important part of the structure, is the foundation. What holds it up. Because if the foundation is not any good, the whole house, no matter how well it's built, will crumble and fall sooner or later. And so, we get the teachings from Jesus that, he's challenging us to build our foundations on the rock. Now listen, I'm going to break this up into 3 different sections, okay? And let's go through them real quick. We're talking about building life, and the first thing I want to touch on this morning is best versus more. Because I think sometimes we trade one for the other. I think we really sometimes kind of move away maybe even trade what's best for what's more in life. And sometimes in doing that, we sort of take shortcuts with our foundation. Sometimes people try to live their life through a time lapse. You ever watch a time lapse video like on YouTube or something? I watched one this week on the Twin Towers in New York, and it said that watch this time lapse. It took 14 years, I think, to build the first Twin Tower, and you could watch the whole thing built in 10 minutes. 10 minutes, a time lapse, and you could see it go from dirt to a structure of some kind and build each stage or each floor of it in 10 minutes. And sometimes we want to live our lives like that too, like it's in a time lapse. Like move through life as fast as I can, grab as much as I can, do as much as I can. And there's not anything necessarily wrong with that, but we miss some of the most important parts. You see, sometimes, guys, we move through life so fast that we miss what's most important. Now, when you read the New Testament or anywhere else in the Bible, you'll find that God never really encourages his people to move through life as fast as they can. Have you noticed that, whether it's Old Testament or New Testament? I noticed that over the years, especially way back when I was a little bit younger and I was doing all this stuff, trying to just put everything I could in my life. And sometimes we trade best for more. Sometimes we're out there doing so much more that we really miss what's best because we're packing so much into our lives. Sometimes there are moments, guys, that we do have to sort of push through things. But you know what? Let me share this with you today. You won't hear many pastors tell you this maybe. Sometimes you need to slow down. Do you know that? Do you ever notice? Sometimes you need to slow down. Sometimes. If you go back to the Bible and you begin reading that for yourself, you will see that God says this. God will say, stop, be still, be quiet, and relax. More than God says, go and get and do and become. Have you noticed that he will say that more? And you know why I think he does? It's not because God wants to sit back in a hammock and sip lemonade. I think it's because God knows that we are so wired to go and to go and to do and to do. And God's like, listen, you got to pull that down. You got to reel that in sometimes. And God encourages us sometimes to slow down, to relax, to take it easy, to be quiet, to listen. Because we are so guilty sometimes, guys, of trading what is best for more. Jesus was saying to build our lives on this foundation that's a rock. And in doing so, we know that foundations take a long time to build, but it's also, like I said before, it holds up the entire house. Sometimes, have you ever thought about this? Have you ever thought that maybe, because I've done this, and it's not easy for me, but I have done it, and I will share this with you, that sometimes we have to stop. You know why? It's because if we don't, you know what's going to happen? We miss what's right in front of us. Have you ever noticed that? My wife is so good at helping me with that. She's like, you know what? Hey, listen, man, you need to slow down, put the handcuffs on or something, because you're going to miss what's right in front of you. And there have been times when I feel like maybe I've done that. I've missed what's right in front of me because I'm looking here, I'm looking there, I'm looking over here. I'm here and I think I should be there. And sometimes maybe you feel the same way. Guys, listen, I don't know what's going on in your life today, and it's none of my business. I care, but it's none of my business. But let me say this to you, and this may not hit everyone, but there could be some of you in this room today, and you're like, man, you know what? If I'm not careful, I'm going to miss what's right in front of me because I'm so worried about what else is out there. You see, you know what we do? We trade today for tomorrow, and we miss everything that's in today because we're so concerned about tomorrow. Sometimes I really believe, guys, that especially maybe even as Christians more, I'm not sure, but we trade best for more. God has the best for you. He does. That's not cliche when I say that. I mean that with all my heart. That God really does have the best for you. And sometimes we miss best because we're after more. And we're not really working on this foundation that takes time to build, to form, to cure. We're too busy wanting to get the house built. And it's like Jesus is like, man, slow down and build on this foundation. Start with the foundation and then build the rest of the house. Sometimes we trade best for more. And then there's this thing too. Sometimes we build our lives on these facades. Now, that's an English word. A facade is English word, and it simply means that basically it's like a fake front in a building. Many buildings there's the structure, and then there's the front of the building that looks really good. It's got all the nice things on it. It's what makes the building look better. It's a facade. That's the part of the building that's a facade. In other words, you may take a really poorly constructed building and put a nice facade on it, and it looks like a temple, okay? Or it looks like a mansion of some kind. And if we're not careful in missing the foundation of our life, we build on these facades, these fake fronts or these fake buildings that really look good, but they don't hold anything up. Now I know that's a little rough, okay? But it's like, man, I don't want to build my life on something that's not going to hold up. Why? It's because you sort of waste your life that way. The foundation Jesus was talking about was a solid rock foundation. And notice that's all he said. He didn't describe exactly what it was. But he did say this, if that we build our lives on that rock, that solid foundation, that we don't have to worry about what else comes. But sometimes we're so busy of moving through life and trying to grab more and building facades that look good but really are not holding anything up, really are not doing anything, that we miss the more important things. Second thing is this, build life. When we build life, that we really have to consider the costs of life. Now let's go over to Luke for a moment, because Jesus is not talking about the foundation, he's talking about a tower. And he's trying to make a point here in Luke chapter 14, verse 28. He says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. You know, and I can imagine Jesus coming to his listeners that day and saying, hey, you know what? Let's just say somebody out here wants to build a tower of some kind. And will he not first sit down and estimate the costs to see if he has enough money to complete it? All right, now he's talking about when we build a tower to make sure that we can finish what we start, but he's also saying that whenever we build something, we need to consider what it's going to cost us. What's entailed? What's required? What are we going to be responsible for in building this tower, this life, okay? And that's the analogy that we're going to use with it. You see, we have to consider the costs of our building. Everything that we have in this life, guys, costs somebody something. You know, I am blown away when I look at what it costs, what some educations cost today. And an education, some educations today can cost upwards of $250,000 for an education. Did you guys know that? Like $250,000 for an education. I mean, that's way out there, isn't it? I mean, that blows my mind. It costs something to get that education, to put all that time and studying and testing and all that into an education. And then leadership, too, has a high price. Whenever you're leading people, some of you will lead people at some point in your life. Whether it's in the church or whether it's in your business or whether it's in the hospital or somewhere, you will lead people. And I will tell you this, that there is a high price in leading people. And when you lead people that do what you lead people that have to do what you tell them to do is one thing. Lead people to do what that don't have to do what you tell them to is something else. Leading paid staff and volunteers are two different things. And there's a high price in being a leader, a high responsibility in being a leader. And so everything that we do in this life costs us something. You know, relationships are very costly. Some of you today, you know, you're already married and you've been married for a while and you know your spouse very well, and you know, you've kind of gotten through that stage. Some of you are maybe dating someone and you're not sure about this person. Some of you are thinking about dating someone and you're not sure, who can I trust? Who's going to be truthful with me? Who's going to be the kind of person I'm looking for? And there's a lot of risks in that. There are some serious risks today in relationships. And people really should be cautious when it comes to relationships. But everything that we do in this life has a price and a cost. And Jesus, no matter how we apply that, Jesus is telling us that anytime that we build something, we should really consider the costs of that thing that we're building. And today we're talking about building life. And so everything in life is like, it has a cost. My education, my job, my family, my home, my car, it all has a cost. It all has a price on it. And so I need to consider the costs of these things as I build life. And that's part of what he's saying here. Can I get you to think about something today? Because every one of us only have a certain amount of time in life, a certain amount of time on the planet, a certain amount of resources to work with. Let me ask you to think about this for a minute, okay? I want to challenge you today to build your life on what lasts. Remember, we go back to the foundation, the rock. That lasts. It's solid. It's static. It's galvanized, okay? And then Jesus is saying, who in the world would build a tower without finding out what it costs, okay? And so it's like, you know, I want to build on something that lasts. And I think God really wants us to put part of our life into something that will outlast us. Hey guys, as young as you are, can I ask you to think about this today? Can I ask you to think about what is it in your life, either now or maybe in the future, that you're going to build on that's going to outlast you? You ever think about that? What's going to outlast me? Is my life going to consist of just my life and then I move on when it's over? Or are you leaving something behind that's going to outlast you? Several years ago, my grandmother was put into a nursing home, and before that, she had a really nice home on a couple acres in this foreign country called Kentucky. And I remember when she had Alzheimer's disease, and she was just 6 months short of being 100 years old when she passed away. And so I remember they auctioned off all her things. She was 99 and a half years old. And she had built all this life on all this stuff, you know, her furniture, her dishes, her coffee pot, all that stuff was in her home. And I remember going in there and we were looking at all her things, and in the basement it was all piled up with stuff. I almost said junk, all piled up with stuff. And then we auctioned her house, all her things in just a few hours. And I'm like, wow. It hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like 99 and a half years auctioned off in 5 hours. Does that make you stop and think? Yeah. And it's like, boy, I can live all my life and do all these things in just a few moments. It's gone. It's forgotten. And everybody's eating fried chicken at home. And it's like, what is going to outlast me? What am I going to do that's going to outlast me? Well, there's a price to that, okay? And Jesus is saying that when we build our house, we build it on a solid foundation. When we build life, we consider the costs, and part of those costs are leaving an example and an influence behind us that can be carried on when we're gone. You know what, guys? This is a little bit more of a serious part of following Jesus, okay? I want my faith walk to cost me something. I do. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to go out and volunteer to be a martyr. Doesn't mean I'm going to be an activist so I can be thrown into jail or be incarcerated or something. Doesn't mean that at all. But what I do mean is this. I want to be more than a spectator sitting in a church building. I want to be more than that. I think God challenges us. I think Jesus is talking about, when we build life, to be more than just someone who's watching and listening, but someone who's actively involved in building life, but also sharing life with others, and that life has to cost something. When we build a tower, he said, consider the costs. See, if we're building anything, it's going to cost us something. And it's like, and I'm only speaking for me today, guys. I really do want my faith walk to cost me something. I want to give something into my faith walk. My relationship with Christ, I want it to cost something. And considering that is what he's saying. Now, can I ask you this? Would you take just a second to consider, is it costing me anything to follow Jesus? Anything at all? Is it costing me time? Is it costing me, I could be doing other things? Is it costing me resources? Is it costing me something to follow Christ in any way or another? What's my faith costing me? And then we look at life. Our spiritual life, it really is the most important part of who we are and who we'll ever be, guys. And when I think about, I want my Christianity, my faith walk to cost me something, one reason is because I know it cost Jesus everything for me to be a part of God's family. It cost him everything. It cost him his life. It cost him everything. So is there something I can give back? Some small part of my life I can get back as a cost, as a price for following him? And then, we look at life itself. Life has its costs, doesn't it? It costs us something. Jesus said, consider the cost before you build a tower. And the reason he did this, guys, is because he said sometimes we can get in over our heads. You see, sometimes we can look at life idealistically. And what that means is this is the way things should be. And then there's the other side, realistically, this is the way things are. And so sometimes when we look at things idealistically, we can run the risk of getting in over our heads. And what that means is I can get into something and now I'm in too deep. Or I'm in something I can't fix. I'm in something I never saw coming. And Jesus is saying, before we do these things, figure out the costs. Determine what this is going to cost before you walk into it. We've all done this, guys. We've made commitments that we can't keep or don't keep. We've done things that we don't think through them, and we just run out there and jump out there and do this and that and make these decisions, and we don't think through them. That's what Jesus was talking about in the beginning when he said a wise man considers the foundation, and he also estimates the cost before he makes these decisions. You know, most of you in here today, I truly believe with all my heart that young people are our future. I do. And with that in mind, I believe those of us who are a little further down life, we have an awesome, wonderful opportunity of investing our life in younger people. And that certainly comes with its cost as well. To invest part of our life in you as much as possible. And that is a price that I love paying on some level. Every one of us this morning, we're going through these stages. When John, my brother-in-law, and I were building this house, we learned that each part of this home had a stage. The foundation, the basement, the framing, the siding, the interior, the insulation, the wiring, the plumbing, the roof. It all went up in stages. It wasn't built in a day. Every part of that house that still stands went through a stage. And every part of your life and my life is going to go through a stage. Your foundation, the framework of your life, the roof that protects you, the siding that keeps you warm, the plumbing that keeps you healthy. It all has a stage. And we're building life in these stages, and the foundation is the thing that holds us up. The frame determines the size, the mechanics make it livable, the roof protects it, and the interior makes it enjoyable. It's all part of the building, and you're building that today. But maybe you've never thought about it quite like that before, but your life is in a stage, and you are in a stage right now in your life. You're building something. And at the end of a building, you know what happens? Inspection. And God is always inspecting something. Everything we build, God inspects. I like to keep that in mind because it keeps me focused, keeps me on target. That everything that I'm doing in my life, whether it's in the church, whether it's in the business, whether it's managing people, whether it's managing money, whatever it might be, God's inspecting every bit of it. There's nothing I do He doesn't inspect. There's nothing I say He doesn't inspect. And He's inspecting our buildings right now. Not in a judgmental way. God's not inspecting your building today to make you feel guilty, okay? Or to shame you in some way. God inspects our buildings. You know why building inspections happen? To make sure they're built properly. And to make sure that they will stand the test of time. And see, God inspects our lives like that sometimes because it's like, I want you to have the best. I want you to enjoy the best. And so let's inspect this part right here to see if there's any improvements that need to be made, to make sure that we're doing things for both your enjoyment and my glory. Last thing this morning is build life, maintaining what you've built. For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field. Dash, semicolon, God's building. You're God's building. You see, God doesn't build stuff. He builds people. And He's building you. You are God's building. And that's why these things are so important, to just grab this stuff and make it work in our lives. Guys, I've owned 3 homes in my life. One in Sharonville, one in College Hill, and one in Butler County. I've owned 3 homes. And I'll tell you, the hardest thing about home ownership is maintaining the home. That's the hardest thing. The payments are easy. That's the easy part. Sitting in the living room watching TV and eating popcorn, that's the easy part. But maintaining the property is the hardest part of owning a home. And that's, you know what? I think that's the hardest part sometimes of being a Christ follower. That initial decision where we jump in there and Jesus saves us and life changes and we're all jacked up and excited about, I will follow Him. But then the years and the months, the weeks go by, things happen, we get disappointed, God doesn't come through, prayer isn't answered. Then we got to maintain this. That's the hardest part sometimes, is maintaining it. But without maintenance, you know what happens to a house? It falls apart, it falls down. A house is a living, breathing thing. And if it's not maintained, it will fall apart, it'll fall down. And those of you who own homes, you know that. You have to paint, clean, polish, wipe, swipe, sweep, everything else to maintain it. And your Christian life is like that too. And mine is. If you don't maintain it, you know what'll happen? It'll fall apart. It will. It'll fall down right in front of you. And so building life, maintain what you build. And I really think that's probably the hardest part. Why? Pastor Ron, why is that the hardest part? Is because there's distractions. There's busyness. There's responsibilities. There's time. All this stuff, these things going on around us. It's hard to maintain a Christian life with all this going on. And then we see these problems come, the storms do come, they will come. Anybody that tells you that Christianity will never have a storm, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that one. Storms come, the rain, but Jesus said it would. Storms come, the rain comes, beats on your house. And the way you maintain it may very well determine how well it stands. And so maintaining is pretty important. Maybe even today something's beating on your house, your life. Maybe you're thinking, you know what, Pastor, I need to think about maintaining a little bit more. Maybe you're thinking this morning, there have been moments when I've traded best for more. And then maybe this morning, maybe the Lord's helped you. I don't know what. I don't pretend to be the Holy Spirit speaking into your heart. He didn't need me to do that. But maybe God is saying to you, I need to go back and work on my foundation a little bit. I need to build on this. I'm just kind of been slacking around here a little bit. I've just sort of been mediocre, nominal in my faith walk. And then when I need God, I'm just, hey, God, come and get me, come and help me. We're all guilty of that sometimes. But we learned some things about building life today from the Sermon on the Mount that really, really help us build a foundation that stands up no matter what through the years when you're 20, 30. And yes, you know what? Someday some of you actually will be 40. Some of you sitting here today, there will come a day when you are going to be 50 and 60 and 70. I'm talking about some of you who are 18 right now. There's going to come a day when you will be 70. Well, how well is everything going to hold up through those years, through those stages? You know what? Bow your heads and close your eyes for a minute, because all I want you to do at this point is just ask God to speak to you. Just ask Him to speak to your heart and reveal to you, hey, God, is there something in this message today that I need to pay attention to? And is there something in my life that I need to work on? Let the Holy Spirit speak to you about that, okay? And then ask God, no matter where your life's going right now, what stage you're in, to help you build the best life that you can for His glory and for your good. Jesus, you died to give us all of this. You died and gave your life that we might have the best. And Lord, I pray the best on everyone here today. I pray your best on people this morning. Help them understand, Lord. Help them receive what you have for them today. Whether it's salvation, Lord, whether it's just a recommitment of their life to you, whatever it might be, help them today, Jesus, and we pray in your name. Amen. Let's stand, please.